We've got a handful of people today so far, and we've got some more people scheduled in to come in later on. Jayadvaita Swami says he's going to come
handful
in
of diamonds is worth more than a truckload of pebbles.
Right. So, Yogesvara, you have to leave at some point, so shall we start with your Vyasa Puja, or would you rather we did some, do a Guru Puja song first or something like that? How would you see
Well, in
things?
the interest of just being able to honor the commitment I made to the Denver temple.
Okay, that's right. All right, so why don't you start with your Vyasa Puja offering to Srila
Oh.
Prabhupada? And we've got the recorders on. Right. Okay, good. Great.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Vishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Satarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrindan Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your Vyasa Puja celebration honoring Srila Prabhupada's appearance in the world. And as I was thinking about this, because there have been a number of these invitations to, I think if you're a member of our generation, Chandrasekhara Swami, you have street cred. And people started inviting you just because we're fewer and fewer these days. So before it's too late, people want to get our memories and our stories about Prabhupada. And
yeah,
that's altogether proper and fitting. But it puts a little pressure on us, doesn't it? To be able to convey something that on its surface you can describe it. I can talk about being with Prabhupada in Paris or being with Prabhupada in Geneva or what happened when we went to the Vatican or stories in London and meeting with famous rock stars or whatever. And those are fun stories. People love to hear those stories. There's a part that's much harder to communicate, and that is, I guess you might call it the internal meaning of these moments, because one of the extraordinary things about spending time with Srila Prabhupada was observing how he was able to find that nugget of Krishna consciousness in every moment. There wasn't anything that took place in Srila Prabhupada's company that was without significance, that was somehow meaningless. There was no meaninglessness ever in Srila Prabhupada's company. It could have been the tiniest little thing. It had significance, and there was something to glean from that. There was something to take away from it. And when I think back on those days and try to communicate to people that sense of being with them, a few things are obvious. One thing is, before you were going to go in to see Srila Prabhupada, inevitably in your mind you would create 15 or 20 questions. I'm going to ask him about this. I'm going to ask him about that. I want to get a better understanding of this thing that he said in this lecture, or what is the meaning of this first. So you wanted to make best use of the time. So you'd have all of these questions. As soon as you got into the room and sat down in front of Srila Prabhupada, everything got resolved. The questions kind of evaporated. As if some unspoken energy in the room resolved any confusion. It just made everything okay, just being with him, because there was something so right and so natural about him. There was no pretense. There was no airs. He was always Srila Prabhupada. And at the same time, I'd have to say that you didn't really always know who you were with. Simultaneously, you knew, I am with my spiritual master, and yet there was something about him that was someplace else, that he was with Krishna, and you kind of sensed that, that you really aren't grasping the totality of this encounter with this pure soul, that he's living in a rarefied environment, in a rarefied realm of love of God, and there's a part of him that he's giving access to. He's allowing us access to a certain part of him. I cannot tell you that I ever felt that I understood the totality of the person I was with. There was a clarity to his thinking that always surprised me, that there wasn't anything uncertain in the way he would address a topic. I had a conversation with him about art in Paris, 1971. And I asked him, I just walked into his room. In those days, you could do that. You could walk into Srila Prabhupada's room, sit down, and begin a conversation. So I did that. I walked into his room. I knocked on his door. He said, come in. I did. I came in. I paid my obeisances and said, if you have a moment, Srila Prabhupada, I have a question for you. He said, yes. What is art in spiritual life? What is the meaning of art for Vaishnavas, for devotees? And he thought for a moment and said, art means putting something in its proper place for best utility. Very often, the first thing that Prabhupada would say to me, I had no clue what he meant. It happened many times. He would say something, and I would always have to ask him, can you explain that for me? I don't understand what it means. He said, yeah, art means, in Krishna consciousness, to put something in its proper place for best utility. Well, I mean, this was 1971. I was a New Yorker. I had come out of the 60s and the Andy Warhol downtown art scene, and said to him, well, there are some artists who create art by taking something out of its natural context. For example, Andy Warhol will take a can of Campbell's soup and take it off the shelf of the grocery store and put it on a canvas, and it will be called art. And people, some people will say it's very beautiful. And Prabhupada said, no, not beauty is different. He said, beauty is not the same thing as art. Beauty is a sense gratification. If it pleases your eyes, then it's beautiful. It may not please my eyes. And he took an imaginary brush and did like a splatter painting, like this. He said, you may think that's beautiful, but I don't. And he said, a true artist knows how to put something in such a way that it inspires others. And he was referring to anything that's done in a spirit of love and devotion for God. And after a while, I said, well, let me see if I can understand. By this definition, does that mean that if someone is sweeping the floor, but they're sweeping the floor with the intention of making it beautiful, putting it in its proper place, as a gesture of devotion to Krishna, then such a person is an artist? Yes. And he said, now you've understood. Anything that's done with that sense of love, that is, in Bhagavad Gita, it's described as the art of yoga, right? The art of, I can't remember exactly what the verse was. The art that bhakti is the art of spiritual life. I can't remember exactly the wording, but something like that. Then he reached out and took a rose from a vase on his desk, and he turned the rose this way and that way, and then he smelled it. And he said, just see Krishna's artistry. He says, who could make such a beautiful thing? And he smelled it again. And he said, there are so many scents, so many fragrances in the earth. How has this flower known to choose this particular fragrance? And, it was that kind of simple yet clear perspective on pretty much everything. So that, there were times you felt like something was very complex, very convoluted in your head, and you'd go in to see Srila Prabhupada, and something about his presence, about him being so uncomplicated, him being so purely about his love for Krishna, that it made everything okay. And in addition to trying, as stumbling as I am, to convey to people who may hear this Vyasa Puja offering a sense of what it was like to be with Srila Prabhupada, there's something that was also extremely clear, and that is he loved us. He loved us. And everyone who spent time with him understood that. He had more faith in us than we had in ourselves. He knew that he had come to the land of the mlechas. He had come to the land of, really, there wasn't any bad habit that we had not mastered. We were complete, utter experts in every abominable behavior known to humanity. And he came in and lifted us up and made us into ladies and gentlemen. He had such faith in us, such confidence that if you just stick to this, if you just continue on, you will see the results. You will come to know Krishna. You will come to know God. It was a wonderful, absolutely wonderful experience of feeling uplifted, of feeling his confidence in us, his faith in us, and truly love for us, that, you're trying. He without saying it in just these words, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the feeling you had was, Srila Prabhupada, you understand how difficult this is, that we're trying our best. And thank you for always being there to calm our fears, resolve our perplexities, and offer us your unqualified love and guidance and instruction. I remember my godbrother Bhagwat, time when the temple was on Henry Street in Brooklyn, stepped on a nail, and so his foot was bandaged. And when he came into the temple room for maybe we can ask people to mute their microphones, Chandrasekhara? Yeah, thank you. Bhagavad walked into the temple room, and there was a kirtan going on, but Prabhupada looked over and saw that he had a bandage on his foot. And he called him over and said, he leaned over, so because the kirtan was loud, and said, what happened to your foot? And Bhagavad described, well, I had an accident. I was doing some service, and I stepped on a nail. And Srila Prabhupada gave him a look of great, deep concern, and said, please take care. Please take care of yourself. And if there's anything at all that I can do to help you, come to see me and let me know. That sense of someone who was there for you. In devotional life, there isn't anything he would not do to help us and encourage us in our devotional service. There were it was something natural. It was something quite natural. It wasn't forced. There was in Los Angeles, he would come back each morning from a morning walk. And one morning in LA, there was a young woman. People would line up on both sides of the walkway to the temple door, and they would exchange flowers with Srila Prabhupada. There's some video footage of it. And one morning, Srila Prabhupada got out of the car, and he was receiving flowers and giving flowers. This one young woman was there with tears streaming down her face. And Prabhupada said, "What's the problem? What's the matter?" And she said, I am not sincere. I have no love for Krishna. I have no attraction to devotional service. I am just a fool. I don't deserve to be a devotee." And Prabhupada gave her a little chuck under the chin like that with his finger, and looked at her and smiled and said, "Don't live with guilt. Just go on with your service." You know, a little statement like that, it can be a lifesaver. It can pull you out of the darkest abyss. Just to be told, don't live with guilt. I mean, after all, I am putting words in his mouth. After all, everyone in this material world is living in the darkness. This place is a dark. So you don't need to focus on that. Focus on the fact that we are here. What a wonderful, miraculous, beautiful, exciting opportunity we have here to engage in devotional life. And just one last thing I would say is that he gave himself to us not only in life, but in death also. We got word, the temple was on 55th Street in 1977 when we got word that he was preparing to leave and had gone to Vrindavan. And the word actually went out. Prabhupada said, "Let everyone come. Let everyone come." Can you imagine? He's on his deathbed and he's saying, "I want all of my boys and girls with me. I want all of my disciples with me." And who, as many as could, flew to India and were with him. And his death became his final gift to us. His whole life was a gift to us. And his death as well. That experience, I talked to my dear godbrother and friend Bharadraj, who was there at the time, and he described it very beautifully. He said Prabhupada gave us in death what we did not have when he was with us in life, namely leaving his body and entering our hearts. We felt him enter our hearts. So on this most glorious of days, when we celebrate Srila Prabhupada's appearance in the world, I'm honored to have been asked to share with you a few recollections. And I hope everyone will experience vicariously, if in no other way, that same sense of being loved by Srila Prabhupada and knowing that he is thinking about you and cares about you and knows that sometimes it gets very, very hard. And we can remember his words. Don't live with guilt. Just go on with your service. So thank you very much, Chandrasekhar, for allowing me to be with you here today.
Thank you very much, Yogesvara. Let me unmute myself. Thank you very much, Yogesvara. I was really amazed by this presentation. You said some things that really caused me to think deeply in a way that I had never thought before, about Srila Prabhupada and about the way that life was like when in his presence. Myself, I was only in Prabhupada's presence once, so I don't have these kind of wealth of experience that some of the devotees do. But just the little vignettes that you brought us through about learning about art, about caring about devotees, having some nail in their foot, or all these things really, I really thank you for sharing that. It was really amazing to me. Or I guess you have to get on to your next.
I have a few minutes if someone has a question.
Okay,
Or
good. So I think we do. We have some time for questions. We're not pushed so drastically for time yet. We'll see as those come in who are also slated to speak.
I know, if I may, I have one other story I could recount if you'd like me to.
Yes, please.
This is from Achyutananda Swami. Achyutananda was the two earliest disciples to go to India. And he was there when Srila Prabhupada arrived to
They have two.
recover. He was not feeling, he had had a crisis here in New York. I believe was it a heart attack or I don't remember exactly what the technical word for it was, but he had to go back to India for his health. And at one point, Achyutananda accompanied him to a town to visit with some of his family members. And family members were coming and going, and then some dignitaries from the area were coming to see him. And then one man came to see him, and they were talking in Bengali, and Achyutananda was there just listening to this, and Prabhupada spent a long time with him. And afterwards, Achyutananda asked him, was that the mayor of the town who came to see him? Prabhupada said, no. He said, was it some high government official from Delhi? Prabhupada said, no. Achyutananda said, so who was that person? You spent so much time with him. Prabhupada said, just a friend. Just a friend. Prabhupada had friends, Not everything was always on some grandiose, majestic level. He had a family, he had friends, and he could be the best friend. And I remember sometimes being with him, and we would just talk about things, I asked him about his children, and he told me about his children. He would ask me how things are going with the French publications, and I'd say this. We went to London. We got some artwork to put in the end pages, and he says, "Oh, were you the main man on the French Bhagavad Gita?" I said, "No, Srila Prabhupada, I was the last man." And there were people in the room. They started laughing. The devotees started laughing. Prabhupada looked at him and said, "No, this is Vaishnava." Now I'm patting myself on the back. No, this is Vaishnava. Always think that you are the last person, not the first person. So he appreciated, that mood, that Vaishnava mood of some humility, whatever I was able to express. And yeah, those are the moments that I remember the most. Yeah, of course, the big moments are important. Those little moments counted for a lot. They counted for a whole lot. Anyway, there it is.
Anyone have any questions for Yogesvara? Anything to add or?
Well, then I just want to thank you again for having.
Thank you very much, Yogesvara. We really appreciate it.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Hare Krishna.
Haribol, Haribol.
Haribol. Thank you for dropping in on us here.
My pleasure.
So I notice that Arundhati is here, and I'm so happy you could make it.
Dear Srila Prabhupada, celebrating your Vyasa Puja for this year of 2020, I offer my most humble obeisances unto you. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shinyavari Paschacha Deshatarine. Thank you for the greatest gift you have given to me and to all humanity. Maybe not everyone has received it, but it's there always through the mercy of your books, where your great presence lies. I am always thankful that I have the opportunity to serve you through typing, composing, transcribing your books. Bhagavad Gita, the Nectar of Devotion, Krishna book, Sri Upanishad, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita. I am most fortunate to have come in contact with you and to have been able to listen and type your holy words. Millions of thank yous cannot really express my gratitude for the gift of being able to serve you. And as well to be with you, Srila Prabhupada, while you were present on the earth in your body. It was a great gift. I thank you over and over. I think I needed your physical presence, so somehow you came to me. I love you, Srila Prabhupada. You taught me yourself what love is. I saw you first at Tompkins Square Park, heard you chant and speak about the Hare Krishna mantra. I chanted along and the seed was planted. And eventually the circumstances of my life brought me directly to your service. Things are crazy in the world right now, Srila Prabhupada, with the coronavirus. Will we get through this? Is it the end of the world as we know it? Will it be a wonderful new beginning? We don't know how it's all going to turn out. The one thing I know is that I can chant Hare Krishna and that the glorious Mahamantra protects me and nourishes me and frees me from fear. As you sang, Bhaja Hare Manashri Nandanandana Abhaya Charanara Vindare, my dear mind, just worship the lotus feet of Krishna, which is the place of all fearlessness. I am still fearful in the mind at times, for sure, but the Mahamantra is my true shelter. What would I do without that? So I thank you over and over again. Dear Srila Prabhupada, all glories to your lotus feet. They are my true shelter. Through them, I can come to connect with the beloved cowherd boy, Sri Krishna, as well as his beloved Srimati Radharani, and all the residents of Sri Vrindavan Dham. I pray I can offer some more service to you in this lifetime, and that somehow I can share your eternal gift to others. By your grace, it will be. All is your grace. Haribol Srila Prabhupada, I love you. Hare Krishna, your aspiring servant, Arundhati Devi Dasi. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Let me unmute myself here. Hare Krishna. So, thank you very much, Arundhati.
Maharaj, can I just say thank you for giving me, can you hear me?
Yes.
Maharaj?
Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you because a lot of people probably be coming in soon. So thank you for thinking of me, albeit last minute, but fortunately I was able to make it. And I feel grateful to be able to get a chance to speak about the glories of Srila Prabhupada. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Yes, it's amazing facility that we have. You can't imagine what this must have been, what this would have seemed like to the devotees of 10 or 20 years ago, to be able to come together in an electronic way, see each other, and discuss Prabhupada's life, in this kind of a way. So it's one of the benedictions of living in the present age and in the electronic age that we are, and it's wonderful. Just by hearing, we are stroking the nectar. We are churning the ocean of milk, and it's coming up in the foam of cream. So I'm going to read my own Vyasa Puja, which I wrote earlier this year. My theme this year, I tried to come up with some kind of theme that is relevant to my life. And because Prabhupada is a lot of things, he's a philosophy, he's a way of life. He's a mentor, he's a direction, a beacon in the darkness, all these different things. And this year, my main key or theme was the idea of the perfect attitude. I sometimes think of Krishna consciousness as groping for the perfect attitude, trying to understand how we should look at the world. Attitudes are internal. I'm going to talk about it in my Vyasa Puja, so I won't get too much into it here. But the attitude is something that is within, that we feel, and that we have as a bearing toward the outside world. And Krishna consciousness gives us the tools to actually understand how to have the perfect attitude. So I'll read this. I don't think it'll take too long. Let me see if I can figure out how to do this in a good way here. Dear Srila Prabhupada, Krishna consciousness is a search for the perfect attitude. I've always thought that Krishna consciousness is synonymous with the perfect attitude. Scriptures inform us of what attitudes are salutary and what attitudes are deleterious. The key here is attitude. And attitudes are far, far more important than accomplishments, mundane emotions, or external situations. We live in a sea of action and reaction, in a sea of human interactions, in a sea of strategic possibilities, and downstream social physical ramifications. The trends in how we navigate those seas and streams are called our character by others. To us, those trends could be called our attitudes. If those trends are investigated and mentally processed, they are called our philosophy of life. We perceive our emotions directly, and usually our actions are mostly reactive and unconsidered. On the other side of the fence, others perceive our trends in our actions from the outside as our character, and then backfigure our attitudes. Sometimes assessing our emotions and attitudes differently than we might. Generally, we don't perceive our attitudes at all. We find it strange when somebody says we have an attitude. We are guided by our attitudes, we're enveloped by our attitudes, but we are blind to our own attitudes. That is to say, to our own attitudes. We are certainly not blind to others' attitudes, in, of course, the individual specific way that we backfigure them. Interesting how that works. During the course of carrying out everyday duties and trying to engage myself to enlarge my scope of preaching, there are those bits of thoughts and emotions at the edge of my city of awareness, just outside the city limits, Catching these fleeting ghosts and examining them is not just a psychological curiosity or pastime, but an important reconnaissance. I'm not all the things that I think, thankfully, but I had better be careful what I allow myself to drift with. We are not our bodies, and similarly, we are not our minds either. The tendency is, however, to identify with what the mind is ruminating about. The more we return to a particular rumination, the more we identify with that rumination and engender even stronger emotions. If those ruminations are negative, we generate negative emotions. The positive version of this same process we call affirmations. Sadly, they are not as easy, natural, or automatic as the negative kind. As an interesting side note, the word rumination has come to have a technical meaning in psychology, in particularly a field of study called RST, Response Styles Theory, advanced by Nolan and Hokusama. They speak of rumination as being the repeated focus on the symptoms, causes, and consequences of one's distress rather than its solution. This use of the word rumination is even more appropriate than its common colloquial use, to which I mostly refer to in this writing. So we have to be careful. There are positive thoughts about expanding our service and the methods and strategies to do so. There are positive thoughts about issues under devotee evaluation. There are positive thoughts about past experiences with devotees and others. There are positive thoughts about personal improvement, and there are positive thoughts even about what may be amiss. But those thoughts are about fixing it. But there are also negative thoughts about failures, self-worth, accomplishments, and the ever-popular human interaction irritations. These negative thoughts never reach a conclusion, but simply recycle over and over. We are not what we think, but we become identified with what we think if we think it long enough. Thus, finding an optimistic and charitable way to view everything is paramount. Thinking about negativity only makes you negative, but we are not negative. We are positive. Rather, we should think about everything from a positive perspective. This is not Pollyanna or rose-colored glasses mentality. It is the realization that everything with Krishna is ultimately a story of grand success. That success may not be yet with us, but it will come soon. When one pleases Krishna, nothing is left unachieved. If we feel lost, we know that we can find Krishna in ourselves. If we feel lost, we know we can find Krishna and ourselves in Prabhupada's books. If we feel unworthy, we know that we are only thinking about our material position and should rather think of the fact that to Krishna each one of us is a special soul. We will never become Radharani. Sorry, that position is taken. If we feel frustrated, we should know that the material world is full of frustrations by its nature, and that is not, and it's not the accomplishments that matter to Krishna, but rather our mental state of striving to please him that does. If we feel angry, we should know that whatever or whoever has made us angry is only a vehicle of Krishna's special mercy upon us, and that we should understand that there's a purpose for which Krishna has made us feel this way. What is that purpose? If we feel failure, we should know that Prabhupada also appeared to fail until very late in his life, and that nothing worthy of achieving is ever achieved on the first try. If we feel afraid, we should know that fear is a sure sign of having a material mentality about having something. Having something material to lose. Rather, we should think about the fact that we will one day lose everything. Do we really want to rot here eternally in this material world with all its terrifying upheaval just because of a few shriveled raisins of material happiness? Also, we can know that just by simply reading the Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, we will begin to feel fearless. Every negative thought or attitude has a positive counterpart. We need to find that positive counterpart. By removing the negative attitudes from our thinking, we will more and more come to the possession of the perfect attitude, the attitude of the devotee. Unfortunately, this attitude will not come to us once and for all, but will be a constant battle that we have to fight until we die. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada, for this message from Krishna that you have delivered to our Western world. Now help me reach and hold this perfect attitude. So to me, I feel more than anything else that throughout life as a devotee, we are fighting our own minds more than we're fighting anything else. And that's why attitudes are important. Finding a good attitude and holding on to a good attitude is certainly not an easy thing. And every negative attitude that we could possibly ever encounter as our mind drifts into something unsavory, every negative attitude does have a positive counterpart. And it's our business to learn how to flip the negative attitudes into a positive one. Through the process of Krishna consciousness, this becomes kind of natural and easy, but sometimes we have to engage in some kind of philosophical look. And in many cases, we just have to be careful with what our ideas or our thoughts revolve around. If we allow ourselves to think about things that are negative, either the negativity of the faults of others, or the negativity of what's happening to us, or the negativity of what's going on in the world. There's no harm in recognizing things that are wrong. The harm is repeatedly thinking about them without figuring out a way to make it better or genuinely wanting to improve. If we think about negative things without the added feature of wanting to make them better, then they will just drag us down. So, as I searched around for a topic to describe, I was thinking, what is key in my life right now? What can I do to make my own life better? What do I need to fight with? What do I need to look at? And this is what came into my mind, and that's why I wrote this particular Vyasa Puja. So,
if asked, yes, I am.
Good, great. And we have a video now, too.
A video? Yes, of course. So, Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gnananjanan Salakaya
More people are now.
Chakshurunalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Dearest Srila Prabhupada, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to you, the foremost servant of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. You are kindly preaching the message of Lord Chaitanya and delivering the Western countries, which are filled with impersonalism and voidism. While traveling to Sridham Mayapur to attend this year's anniversary celebration of Lord Chaitanya's appearance and my first GBC annual meeting in 32 years, I reflected on the instruction you once gave one of your prominent disciples who asked you, "Now you are present, Srila Prabhupada, so everything is all right. But what if, in the course of time, when you are not here, ISKCON falls from the standard? What should I do?" You replied without hesitating, "You are one of ISKCON's important members, so work for the correction, but don't leave. Beloved Prabhupada, this powerful instruction would periodically roil the hearts of your disciples during your lifetime, but never so much as since your departure. During your presence among us, you were the steady captain of the ISKCON ship, who always knew how to correct any misguided course. You made it easy for us to never leave ISKCON, which we equated with you. ISKCON is still and always yours. So to keep faith with you, each of us must learn how to internalize the meaning of your instruction, to work for the correction and never leave. By seeking our own correction, we make ISKCON better. By seeking to correct ISKCON whenever needed, we better your society for the benefit of the devotees and all humanity now and for future generations. So doing, we please you, Lord Chaitanya's pure devotee. In faithful implementation of your instruction, we read your books and follow them in our daily lives. We make time to chant our rounds properly. We preach Krishna consciousness, especially by book distribution and prasadam distribution, in whatever condition of life we find ourselves in. We maintain association with devotees. We respect prasadam only, and we willingly work for the correction and never leave. Please fortify our will to be forever true to your instructions, so that future generations will find ISKCON a hospitable home as you intended, one in which all may live harmoniously and confidently in difficult times. Your loving servant always, Guru Gauranga Das.
I notice that Nrsimhananda is on from Los Angeles here. Would you feel okay about offering something for Srila Prabhupada for us here on the other side of the coast here in New York?
No, I feel very privileged and undeserving, really, of being with such exalted Vaishnavas and on this very auspicious day. And I wrote my offering some time ago. I don't remember exactly when I wrote it, so it'll be kind of a surprise to me, as it will be probably for you to hear it. But let me just get it up on the screen. Hope I didn't say anything too embarrassing to myself. Let me just find it.
It's kind of interesting that we write our Vyasa Pujas early in the year, and then we come again to them about 6 months later when we've forgotten anything we had to say.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nite Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharmini Nivise Sashin Yavadi Paschachadesha Tamerne. Our respectful obeisances are unto you, spiritual master, servant of Saraswati Goswami. You are kindly preaching the message of Lord Chaitanya Dev and delivering the Western countries, which are filled with impersonalism and voidism. 49 years have passed since we were introduced. You were just written words and a picture. It was a black and white profile. You held your finger up as if making the point. You said, Godhead is light, nescience is darkness. Where there is Godhead, there's no nescience. Nescience was not in my vocabulary. And much later I discovered that it meant lack of knowledge, ignorance, agnosticism. I looked up from the magazine cover to see a bus passing. That magazine was Back to Godhead. It had an advertisement on the side promoting some product. In your head, you know it's right. I glanced back down at the magazine. Krishna in his Shyam Sundar form was on the cover. I'd never seen anything like it. He was indescribably beautiful. I didn't know then that you had personally coached the artist. Every detail was under your direction. Nor did I ever heard the word Godhead. What was that? God, yes, but what was with this head thing? And then inexplicably, the entire presentation of words and picture seemed very familiar. I must have read the magazine. I don't have any memory of anything except the cover. Little did I know that you were the wizard behind all these invitations being distributed in streets in some major cities of the world. And by the time I received it in 1971, you had already planted seeds in numerous countries. Devotees were ubiquitous in city centers. The chanting of Hare Krishna was becoming quite famous. I moved into a temple, really a dingy apartment, within 3 days of being handed that magazine. I didn't need to meet you in the flesh to have been inspired to follow your orders. In literature, a character is created by 5 different types of descriptions. 1, the appearance. You were mysterious and regal, confident and otherworldly. 2, what other people say about him. Wise, kind, pure. 3, what he does. Goes everywhere to talk about Krishna, writes about Krishna. And 4, what he thinks. How to serve Krishna. How Krishna is doing everything. And 5, with whom he associates. Devotees, of course. For many months, I never met you in person, but I began to know you. And when I finally saw you, I was overwhelmed with gratitude. Tears of gratefulness flowed from my eyes for hours. Vani and/or Vapu, the effect is the same. And though I didn't have much personal time with you in the ensuing years, I felt ever closer. Whether working at Tiffany Press to print your books, hearing your lectures, offering you prasad, my affection for you continues to grow. And I see it in others who have come to ISKCON long after your departure in 1977. You are living art and sound. Your mercy keeps flowing. Every magazine or book is an ocean of your personal love. No wonder the younger generation venerate you. You live on, just as you told us. In fact, the younger generations often know you better. One devotee in India memorized all your pastimes recounted in the Lilamrita and the memory series. He had a story for every question and occasion. Your story. The importance in hearing the description of the personality of Godhead for making advancement in Krishna consciousness cannot be overestimated. And similarly, the value in hearing the words and actions of a pure devotee are even more exalted. You've told us that there's no difference between chanting the name of Krishna and that of his pure devotee. And therefore we sing Jai Prabhupada in Kirtan and Bhajan. And anyone who simply sees your picture or words from your books is purified. That the gateway to the temple in ancient Jerusalem was known as the Eye of the Needle. It was very narrow, and worshippers entered one at a time. And similarly, entrances to the old Indian temples have gopurams and spare passageways leading to the deity. You, on the other hand, open your arms wide to all aspiring bhaktas. You embrace all the malechas, the yavanas, the low-born. You give Gayatri mantra to women. Your heart is big enough to accommodate the entire world. And in this mood, the foundational statement of your position in ISKCON was crafted and ratified by the GBC in 2013. You are living art and sound. All the present and future ISKCONites recognize, or should, that although through your mercy, all the sincere devotees can go home, back to Godhead. You said that the acharyas simply stay in the material world, appearing in one planet after another to relieve the suffering of the conditioned souls. And certainly, there are mysteries that my tiny and confused intellect will never unravel. Your destination is surely one of them. And I know that wherever you have gone, your grace continues to light up this world and lives to inspire the jivas in order to wake up to their birthright of unalloyed devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that blessed Lord, Sri Krishna. You like that term, blessed Lord. You authorized its use not only in the Gita, but used it in the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita without any reference to its other uses. As an adjective, blessed means worthy of adoration and or sacred. How perfect to describe Sri Krishna. How appropriate to describe you, the manifestation of the Lord's blessings. Every Vyasa Puja, I'm reminded of how much service I have not done for your divine grace. Yet you continue to engage me in working in Krishna conscious movies, chairing the Sabha, chanting 16 rounds daily, only by your mercy, and giving me the best gift that anyone could ever get, sadhu sangha. Health, happiness, wealth, fame, everything pales in the glow of the gift of good devotee association. This is how I see you, living, guiding, counseling, commiserating through your followers. Whether they or I have differences of opinions, by your divine mercy, I love each and every one of them. Please continue to shower their blessings on me, those blessings on me and all of the souls fortunate enough to know about you. I beg to remain your fallen and useless servant, Srimad.
Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate, Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane, Namaste, Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pacharane, Nirvishesha Shunyavari Paschachate Tatayane. Dear Srila Prabhupada,
We'll see if we can mute that.
if they want to go first, that's fine.
I'm trying to figure out which one that's coming from. Just a second. Everybody, please mute yourself unless you're speaking. Do you have 2 items on in your... Okay.
So try again.
Okay. I think I found it. Whatever 73275444460 is, that was where it was coming from. Sometimes people have a phone and a Zoom computer open at the same time, and it feeds back between the 2 of them, causes that horrible screeching. Okay, so please go ahead.
732754 is a good friend of mine. Glad to see you here. Dear Srila Prabhupada, please accept my humble obeisance. All glories to your divine grace. You are the master of masters. You are the one at whose feet other masters sit. I started thinking about why these things are true. I don't think you came to America and spread Krishna consciousness all over the world on the strength of Vaishnava philosophy alone. It wasn't just the multitude of books you were able to produce or the temples and centers you were able to build. Nor was it your vast intelligence and ability to organize and oversee a worldwide spiritual movement. The staggering scope of your accomplishments and the unbelievable enormity of your achievements were able to take hold mainly by the force of your love. It was the sincerity of your selfless caring, your unwavering faith and devotion to your guru, your genuine concern for your disciples and for everyone with whom you came in contact that attracted and continues to attract so many to your lotus feet. Your disciples also achieved amazing things. How did they do it? They had a passionate and intense eagerness to please you. Where did that come from? That came from the depth of their love for you. And where did their love for you come from? It came from the power and unconditional nature of your love for them. Your love carried you overseas and through the skies of the world.
Okay, I've got it, I think.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah. You can continue. I was trying to mute the people who were creating the noise.
Your love carried you overseas and through the skies of this world, and into almost every continent of the world as well. Your love got into people's heads and into their hearts. Your love created trust and loyalty, respect and reverence, attachment and peace. Your followers are often willing to do anything and everything for you, and they often have. My beloved Guru Maharaj, His Holiness Bhakti True Swami Maharaj, is one such follower. Due to his resolute and uncompromising love for you, that you inspired in him, and after decades of physical separation from you, he could no longer bear being apart from your Vapu. You must have decided that it was all right for him to finally reunite with you at this point in his glorious, all too brief life. How can any of us second guess you? You have always been the purest of the pure, the topmost lover of Sri Krishna and ambassador of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I cannot sit here and wonder why you didn't allow him to stay with us longer. I can imagine you and Krishna working out his return to you both, while also taking into consideration who and what he would leave behind. But I cannot second guess because you know everything and I know nothing. I only have what I feel, which is heartache from his passing, and gratitude to you, dear grandfather, for giving him the greatest gifts of his life, your love and his return to your lotus feet. Unlike my Guru Maharaj, who is reunited with you after only some 43 years, it will likely take me lifetimes before I can have the honor, privilege, and blessing of being with you both. But by his considerable potency, anything is possible. And as he always said, whatever potency he has comes from you. I pray for your mercy, Srila Prabhupada, and the ability to do something big, or even something small, in order to demonstrate my love for you. Your meager servant, Yadunatha Dasa.
Oh, just a few quick words. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Pacharni Nirvishesha Shrunavadi Paschata Deshatadine. So I just wanted to do a quick appreciation, like a very profound appreciation I have for something Srila Prabhupada, a little passage that Srila Prabhupada wrote in the purport. It's in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, the third verse, where they talk about how Srimad Bhagavatam is full of rasa. And so Srila Prabhupada says something very simple and basic, but it's actually very profound. He says, these Shruti mantras indicate that every living being has its constitutional position, which is endowed with a particular type of rasa to be exchanged with the personality of Godhead. In the liberated condition only, this primary rasa is experienced in full. And so it's like a very simple thing he's saying, but when I read he's referring to the Taittiriya Upanishad when he talks about that. And I've seen like these big debates of these Vedantists, these different Vaishnava Vedantists on this Taittiriya Upanishad, on this passage. And the ultimate conclusion of it is what he's saying here, that every living being has his own particular rasa that is meant to be uncovered and experienced. And what Srila Prabhupada is condensing this like very sophisticated Upanishadic knowledge in a very simple, easily digestible sentences for us to understand and appreciate and move in our devotional service. So my basic appreciation for Srila Prabhupada is that highest knowledge is there in very simple language for us. So that's what I wanted to.
I would just say one thing to pick up on the motif you mentioned about Prabhupada, his travels and his austerities. Every year at this time, I reflect on that most improbable journey, because this is actually the time Prabhupada is headed to Calcutta from Mumbai to go to the King George dockyard to get on the Jaladuta. Srila Prabhupada embarked from Calcutta on August 13th, 1965, which is tomorrow, 55 years ago to the day. And at the risk of promoting something that I did, you'll forgive me, I would like to post for anyone who's interested a link to a 30-minute audio-visual presentation on Prabhupada's journey. It's titled The Most Improbable Journey, and I was asked to give it at the 50th anniversary commemoration of Prabhupada's arrival in Boston. But what I thought as I prepared this was, where is Prabhupada today? And I researched through his diary, through archival photos, wherever possible. And I wanted to see what Prabhupada saw and hear what Prabhupada heard, as if I were tagging along behind him. And so that was the mood in which I put together that presentation. Initially, it was just pictures, and I was very active at that some years ago still with the Swiss Yatra. So every day I would send a picture to their Facebook page, which was Prabhupada 50x years ago is doing this right now. And, you know, they would wait every day, they'd be looking, what's the next picture? That kind of eagerness of meeting Prabhupada every day wherever he was, you know, whether the Jaladuta was stopping in Colombo, where Prabhupada observed how clean the streets were and how Vedic culture was still palpable in Sri Lanka, or as the journey went on in Coimbatore, where Prabhupada's books arrived, 200 sets of Bhagavatams were unloaded onto the Jaladuta. Then the Jaladuta set sail into the Indian Ocean, and it was Janmashtami. And Captain Pandya asked Swamiji if he wanted to say a few words about Krishna's appearance, and Prabhupada spoke to the crew and gave a lecture on Janmashtami. And then Prabhupada crossed the Indian Ocean, and as he was about to enter the Red Sea, Prabhupada had 2 heart attacks. And Prabhupada tells the story about how he dreamt that Krishna saved him. Krishna was rowing a boat and he saved him. And then going through the Red Sea, you know, what must Prabhupada have seen? Surely Prabhupada went on the deck at some point and he saw these gigantic mosques, and there's pictures of them. All these things I searched to get archival pictures wherever possible. And then emerging from the Red Sea through the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean, Prabhupada commented on the Algerian coast. He commented on Gibraltar as he passed through. He commented that the captain told him that normally the Atlantic is much rougher, but this year it was the calmest he'd ever seen. And Prabhupada observed that had it not been for the calm waters of the Atlantic, he didn't think he would have survived the journey. So anyway, if you're interested, I'll post that right now on the everyone thing here where you see the YouTube link. And if you're interested, Travel with Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. So what I think I want to do right now is, unless somebody really wants to say something, we can do a quick kirtan. We didn't get a chance to do that at the very end because Yogesvara was on and he had to immediately segue into another Zoom conference right after this one. So it was not possible for him to wait. So we didn't get a chance to do a Guru Vandanam at the very beginning. So maybe we can do that. By the way, for those of you who are interested, Guru Gauranga has given the URL to his video presentation on the chat line if you would want to take a look at it. Now, my realization has been that with Zoom, music doesn't work very well. You have to, it has to be a one-way kind of music. In other words, music comes from one source and everyone else just kind of participates by listening because otherwise it doesn't really work. So let me see if I can get it up here. Oh, okay. Now, I didn't get a chance to get any instruments set up, but we'll give it a roll here. And then you all can, if you want, mute yourselves and sing along, because if we don't mute, the backwash of everybody else's repeating will be off time. And that's not because of anybody's lack of musicianship. It's just because there is a time delay. Oh, is Jayadvaita Swami here? You just saved everybody from hearing me sing. So let me see if we can get him on here. Jayadvaita Swami, are you there? I see your picture. Yes. So would you care to say something to the group at this point? We are... Okay. So I'll do a quick Shri Guru Vandana and then we'll move on to having you make some presentation for our group here. Again, everybody, probably best if you mute, but you can sing along after you're muted, and that should work out. Otherwise, there will be ricocheting sound, which will be impossible to work with. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Bando Mui Savadana Mate Bando Mui Savadana Mate Shri Guru Charane Rati Ese Uttama Gati Shri Guru Charane Rati Ese Uttama Gati Ye Prasade Pure Sarva Asha Ye Prasade Pure Sarva Asha Shri Guru Charane Rati Ese Uttama Gati Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise uttama gati. Ye prasade pure sarva asha. Ye prasade pure sarva asha. Guru mukha padma bhakya. Chite te koriya aikya. Guru mukha padma bhakya. Chite te koriya aikya. Arna koriho mane asha. Arna koriho mane asha. Shri Guru Charane Rati. Aise uttama gati. Shri Guru Charane Rati. Aise uttama gati. Ye prasade pure sarva asha. Ye prasade pure sarva asha. Chakudan dilo ye, janme janme Prabhu se. Chakudan dilo ye, janme janme Prabhu se. Divya gyan hriday prokasito. Divya gyan hriday prokasito. Prema bhakti yaha hoite, avaja vinasayate. Prema bhakti yaha hoite, avaja vinasayate. Vede gai yahara charito. Vede gai yahara charito. Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu, Adhama Janara Bandhu. Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu, Adhama Janara Bandhu. Lokanath Lokanath Jivana. Lokanath Lokanath Jivana. Ha ha Prabhu Karodaya. Deho more parachaya. Ha ha Prabhu Karodaya. Deho more parachaya. Ebe jas gusuk tribhuvana. Duo pade lo elo sharana. Srila Prabhupada patita pavana. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvajikacharya To Tarasata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Premsikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shamkund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki, Vrindavan Dhamma Ki, Mayapur Navadvipa Dhamma Ki, Ayodhya Dhamma Ki, Dwarka Dhamma Ki, Jagannath Puri Dhamma Ki, Eka Chakra Dhamma Ki, Ganga Mai Ki, Jamuna Mai Ki, Tulsi Devi Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Transcendental Book Distribution Ki, Harinam Sankirtan Ki, Transcendental Prasad Distribution Ki, Sambheda Bhakta Vrinda Ki, Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. So I thank all of you for collecting together to participate in our discussion about Srila Prabhupada and our reading of Vyasa Pujas, and also for those who were just explaining their hearts about
Om Jnana Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mayam Tadati Shapadantikam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaudavani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Ashtacha Deshatarane. There are many different ways that we can look at Srila Prabhupada. We can take a deep ontological look and see his function as the extended portion of the personality of Godhead, the representative of all Dev Tattva, the external representation of the super soul. Or we can look at the very personal aspects of Srila Prabhupada, his particular what would you say, particular characteristics, which are the subject matter of endless discussion, could be the endless wonderful discussion. We can look at his missionary activities. There's so many things we can talk about. 173275,
Yeah, right.
etc.
Yeah,
You
we
can
that
mute
one
your
too.
microphone. Thank you. Acharjamam Vijaniyam Naivakan Manyeta Karyachet. One should never be envious of the spiritual master, thinking him an ordinary living being. Sarvadeva Mayo Guru. He's the representative of all the demigods, or the controller of all the demigods, Krishna. So when we appreciate his personal qualities, we need to keep that in mind, that he's the carrying the authority and the mercy and the desire of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he's not subject to our material calculations. I once asked Srila Prabhupada a question. It's a little famous. I was on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada in Sri Dhammayapur. Not me alone, so many big shots. Actually, I was a brahmachari then, and so many big sannyasis were on the walk, GBC men. I also somehow got in. And I asked Srila Prabhupada a question that sometimes from the material point of view, this is Gaur Purnima time, naturally. From the material point of view, we sometimes see that the spiritual master makes mistakes. And Srila Prabhupada said, that is material point of view. And I said, well, even in spiritual things, I was pushing things, even in spiritual things, sometimes it appears to our mundane vision that he makes mistakes. He may not remember a verse, or he may quote it improperly. Prabhupada again said that this was the material point of view. He said that we have to see how the spiritual master is preaching. Acharya Samshanat, Adi Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita. Acharya Samshanat, how the spiritual master is preaching the message of Krishna. That we have to look to. And someone else who was on the walk, I don't recall who, brought up the verse from first canto. Let's see. Yasvanubhavam akilam shruti saramekam adhyatma deepam aditi tirshatam tamantam No, it's the verse before that. Samontam samsarinam kurunaya paranaguyam tam vyasa sunu priyami gurum guninam. I've forgotten exactly, but the purport is that the spiritual master, that Sukadeva Goswami was as good as the super soul, and he could enter the hearts of everyone. So the devotee was sort of putting forward that verse, and I think probing for the further information on how it is that the spiritual master enters the hearts of everyone and how he's all-knowing like the super soul. And Srila Prabhupada sort of just let that fall by the wayside. He could have picked it up and said yes and made an issue of it. But he put it aside and focused on this point, that the spiritual master is carrying out the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, carrying forward his mission and preaching. So we have to look to that. He said the spiritual master is not a magician. Yeah, that's what he said about that verse. He said the spiritual master is not a magician. So we have to see how he's preaching. I remember Yadunatha Prabhu told the story one time, more than once. I heard it from him several times, how he'd come to the storefront in the early days, and Hari Charan could mute his microphone, that would help us. How he came to the storefront, and there's a knife, yeah, that's good. How he came to the storefront and saw Srila Prabhupada sitting on the dais. I guess he was leading the chanting, and he looked very, like a classic monk, and very impressive sitting there. And then Prabhupada finished the kirtan and started preparing for the class, took out the Bhagavatam and put on his glasses. And Yadunatha thought, wait a second, he's a Swami, what does he need glasses for? It was brand new. So this is our mundane calculation, that if he's perfect, then he shouldn't need glasses. He should be able to see perfectly. So again, Prabhupada said, not on that occasion, but going back to that morning walk, Prabhupada said that the spiritual master is not a magician. If you could please mute your microphone, thank you.
I'm trying to get them as I'm watching.
I think there's some setting that when people enter, you can have their microphones muted, Marge.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if you can get to that while we're in session. We might have to set that as a setting before we start. Let me see if there's. I'll take a look and check that out.
Yeah. So that was Prabhupada's point, that the spiritual master is a living entity. He's not the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But Kintu Prabhuya Priya Evritasya, he's dear to Krishna because he carries out the mission of Krishna. As a footnote to that, after the walk, the big shots all got on my case. My sannyasi godbrothers, the GBC men, big men who'd been on the walk, they were like steaming that. How could you ask Prabhupada those questions? Especially that question, sometimes he forgets a verse and so on. That was really pushing it because, of course, we've all heard Prabhupada say, what is that verse? And not remember or quote it a little differently than the way it's written. So I was pushing it. So how could you ask those questions? That was so offensive. And so after that, after the class, I went up to Srila Prabhupada's rooms. Prabhupada was staying in his rooms in the Lotus building. And I think was just finishing his breakfast. He just finished. So I offered my obeisances. I said, Srila Prabhupada, that question this morning, Prabhupada said, what is that? And I recapped the question. I said, Srila Prabhupada, was that offensive? And Prabhupada said, not offensive. He said, just ignorant. So I was very happy. I don't mind being ignorant. Offensive is something else. And that also we need to always be careful, never to relativize the spiritual master, to think that the spiritual master is an ordinary human being, to allow familiarity to breed contempt. Just as Prabhupada said when about the deity worship, he said, always be careful. You are dealing with Krishna. So when iPhone, if you could mute yourself, please. Thank you. So when we're dealing with the spiritual master, we're dealing with the Krishna's representative, even though he may behave like an ordinary human being in our estimation, or he may joke with us or be friendly or whatever. We always need to keep in mind that he's his exalted position. I remember one time in Prabhupada's last days, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was serving Srila Prabhupada very intimately. Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Bhavananda Maharaj at the time, Bhakti Chara Maharaj, they were absorbed, fully engaged in seeing to Prabhupada's all needs, everything that he needed done, and especially Tamal Krishna Maharaj. If there was anything, Prabhupada would always, where's Tamal? Call Tamal. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was so capable and responsible and intelligent and devoted. So Prabhupada would depend on him for so many things. In fact, one time, I'm diverting the point, but anyway, sometime during the days of tension between ISKCON and Srila B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, the GBC sent over a group, a delegation really, to talk with Srila Sridhar Maharaj and try to establish some rapprochement. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj led the group, he led the speaking. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj recalled, he said some affectionate things about Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And he said that Srila Prabhupada said that I would have made him the Acharya, but others would have objected. He is and then he turned to one of his assistants and asked for the English of a Bengali word. What is that? A bully. He's a bully. So anyway, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was serving Srila Prabhupada very intimately and devotedly. And especially trying to manage things in such a way that Prabhupada would recover his health and that he would eat, he would gain strength. So on one occasion, he was trying to coax Prabhupada to eat something. And he became a little, almost like the way a mother tries to coax a child, a little taking that mood. And Prabhupada at once called him out on it. That I forget exactly how he said it, but basically said, "Sir, you're getting presumptuous here." And Tamal Krishna Maharaj at once, backed off. He once backed off and apologized to Prabhupada. So Prabhupada kept that, although he could be very, what's the word, informal. He also kept that position that he is the spiritual master and that he is Krishna's representative. And he was particularly careful on the corporate level, you can say, the society level, to see that that principle was firmly established. These words, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, had great importance for Srila Prabhupada, not because he needed a title for himself, but because he saw the importance of it for our welfare and for the future of the society. I remember one time, well, early in the days of ISKCON Press before the BBT, when we were in Boston, we were publishing, Prabhupada wanted us to publish the second canto chapter by chapter. He didn't want to, it was his way of moving things along. He didn't want us to plod along on this book and one day come out with it. He wanted to see it. So he had us publish it chapter by chapter. He said, you put together a chapter, composing, printing, and then at the end, after you've finished, I think there's 10 chapters in second canto. After you've finished all the chapters, then you can bind them together as a canto. Yeah, thank you. So we were doing that, and it worked. In fact, it got us into a rhythm of production. But we got the word from the West Coast, I guess from Karandar, that Prabhupada was unhappy because we left out we hadn't put that he was the founder on underneath his name. The first chapter came out and his name was there, but it didn't say founder. So then we printed it again, founder of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Then we got a message, no, Charya should be there. So all right, we blacked out the line that said founder and redid it and put Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So it took a few iterations before we finally got it right, founder Acharya, and it's been that ever since. But when Prabhupada came to Los Angeles, just after the press had moved there, we had that building that we were leasing or renting, 9711 Venice Boulevard, and it was quite the place. The BBT was well established there in proper offices, and we just moved there a little before Prabhupada came, and Prabhupada saw that on the side of the building it said Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, but again the founder Acharya line wasn't there. So then those who were in charge caught hell from Prabhupada, even though they had the letters. Actually, the letters were there, they were just hadn't put them up yet, but they got it from Prabhupada that this identification is very important. Founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So there may be different acharyas, and he may have been the founder, but his position as founder acharya is unique. And Ravindra Prabhu has written about that at some length. I was thinking of something. What was it? Yeah, but Prabhupada was at the same time humble. When his first hardcover book published in America was Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, that came out before the abridged Macmillan Bhagavad Gita. Ramesvara Prabhu essentially he coordinated the publishing. And when it came to the cover design, Prabhupada critiqued it. But he made the point, his name apparently had been at the top. But Prabhupada said that this wasn't right. He said to put his name at the bottom. He said, my name should not appear above the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Or as you see the picture, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was there, the Panchatattva were there. So Prabhupada wanted his name at the bottom. This was, of course, before the founder Acharya days, but in any case, that was the position that he wanted. As a matter of, this is, the Vaishnavas actually are very careful about etiquette. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it's mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita that he couldn't tolerate transgressions of Vaishnava etiquette. So Prabhupada was the example also as he was the example of everything. He was the example of Vaishnava etiquette. And you see that even that when the Acharyas write their commentaries or when Vaishnavas write their books, if on the title page or the what they call the full title page inside the book, if the book includes the commentaries of Jiva Goswami or whoever, then they always set it up in such a way that their own name is at the bottom. Our name shouldn't appear above the name of our superiors. So you can say it's just a point of etiquette, but in Vaishnava society, everything has meaning. Everything has meaning. Etiquette has meaning. So the mentality is the central point, that one has to always keep in mind that one is a servant of the spiritual master or the servant of his servants. And that's pure Krishna consciousness. And that was Prabhupada's example. He always referred the credit over to his spiritual master. If there's any credit, then it belongs to my spiritual master. I'm just trying to carry out his instructions. And if there's any credit, it's simply that I've presented things, everything as it is, without adding or subtracting or changing. So Prabhupada had that qualification. He didn't add, subtract, or change. And he also considered himself always the servant. This is the real position of the living being. Jivera Svarupa Krishnera Nityadas. That the materialist somehow or other wants to be the master, even if he's master of a garbage truck, he wants to be the master. But the real position of every living being is to be the servant. So the spiritual master trains the disciple in that understanding, essentially curing him of the disease of overlordship, of separate interest, of wanting to master the material energy, and trains him to be a servant of Krishna. So Prabhupada did that very perfectly. He showed the example, an outstanding, unmatched example of what it means to be a servant of the spiritual master. And he trained us in that way. And we can try to carry out his instructions. He made that point also, that we associate with the spiritual master always by his instructions. The physical presence is sometimes with us and sometimes not. But the sound vibration, the Hare Krishna mantra, the instructions that we received on devotional service are always with us as long as we want to be with them, as long as we keep them in our hearts and take them as our motto in life. Prophet sometimes said, or as our heart and soul. Then that's our success. The more we can please the spiritual master, Yasya Prasada, Bhagavat Prasada. When he's pleased, then Krishna is pleased. Well, maybe I should stop here. I think I've talked, you asked me to talk for a long time, so I did. Anything else I can do?
Thank you very much, Jayadvaita Swami. We appreciate very much your sharing with us. Now I would like to ask Ramesvara to speak, if he would. He can unmute himself. He couldn't be with us until just now, so I'll give him a chance to say some words about Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Om Gyan Timrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshusun Militan Jaina Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Vanchkalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhye Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, from the way Maharaj spoke, I think Chandrasekhara Maharaj, you're having devotees speak about Srila Prabhupada rather than read an offering to Srila Prabhupada. So
no, not necessarily. It's kind of, speaker's choice tonight, whatever you care to provide.
Well, I would like to describe some things about Srila Prabhupada as an offering to him. Somehow, this very undeserving soul had a advantage or a certain point ability to see Prabhupada closely when he was performing his incredible pastime of bringing Krishna to the world, describing how Krishna comes into the material universe, how he creates the universe, describing Krishna's different energies, describing beyond this universe, the cycles of the universe, beyond all of that, describing the spiritual world. Srila Prabhupada, as I saw him, came down into this plane that we live on in order to give all of this, to give Krishna to all of us. As I saw Prabhupada, he was an eternal resident of Goloka Vrindavan, the spiritual world. And within that spiritual world, he was an eternal associate of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna combined in their form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was sent to be the founder, Acharya, as Maharaj described, of the modern day Hare Krishna movement, but founding a movement that was predicted to endure and last and transform the universe for 10,000 years. just that alone, if you think about it and reflect on Prabhupada's mission, on the task of presenting knowledge in the form of these books in a way that would be relevant for the world today, for the world 40, 50 years ago, but for the world 100 years from now, which none of us could even imagine. I mean, we couldn't imagine 6 months ago the world we're in now. And the oil was shut down by some insignificant virus. I shouldn't say insignificant. I meant it's insignificant in its invisible size, whatever a virus is. Shut the whole planet down, apparently. We couldn't foresee that. Imagine having as your service writing in a way that would be relevant for the future. A future that we can't see, but he could. And not just 100 years or 50 years. Our puny brains can't grasp the concept of human life in 1,000 years, in a millennium, 10,000 years. The things that Prabhupada knew and didn't tell us, but knew, because we could, our brains couldn't contain it. You often alluded to that there's so much that if he revealed everything, once he even said, they would arrest me. He actually revealed all the things that he knows and what this Hare Krishna movement's going to do in order to stamp out all the symptoms of Kali Yuga for these 10,000 years. So sometimes when I'm meditating on Prabhupada and I think of him having that ability, that being empowered to do that, to write books that would be relevant for thousands and thousands of years, regardless of the circumstances of the future of human society. I stumble and can't approach it. I have so much reverence for Prabhupada that I just am like a crumb, a little speck of dust when I think of his grandeur, his empowerment, and his abilities. There was another aspect of Prabhupada that I was able to observe. There were a few occasions, not many, but a few occasions where he would actually allow me to be present when he was writing his books, when he was speaking his purports and translations. And what can I compare that to? I personally had an experience whenever Srila Prabhupada in the morning program would start singing before he would give Bhagavatam class, the prayer Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Every time I saw Prabhupada singing that, I felt, although his body seemed to be physically there, Prabhupada was right in Goloka Vrindavan as he was singing those transcendental vibrations. He was not on our plane, he was there. And sometimes he would open his eyes to look at us, but then immediately go back into this trance where he was with Radha and Krishna and the residents of Vrindavan and Mother Jasoda, and on the banks of the Jamuna, he was there. And I'm sure I am not the only devotee that felt that when Prabhupada. So in that way, when I saw Srila Prabhupada on those rare occasions, when he allowed me to actually observe him as he spoke his books, his purports, and his translations, as he was writing them, I had a profound sense of he is seeing every single thing that he is writing about. When he writes about how Krishna descends in different incarnations, he's seeing that as he's speaking about it. When he's describing how unlimited millions and billions of universes come out of him and grow and manifest and then are drawn back into him in these cycles. He's seeing that when he's describing the position of the jiva in this material world.
Who's that?
He's
Who?
seeing that. I'm sorry. I saw I was muted. Did I?
No,
was I muted the whole time?
No, you were just muted for the last few seconds.
can't
I was
hear you,
trying to mute
Chandrasekhara.
the
You're muted.
noisemakers, and I hit the wrong thing because it switched right as I did it. So
You were not
we should be
muted.
okay now.
Oh, okay. Hare Krishna.
Sorry.
So, the experience and realization that I had when I saw Prabhupada writing his books was that he was experiencing and seeing what he was writing about. He wasn't just a scholar, a great Sanskrit scholar, a great Vedic scholar. He was so much more. He is someone from the spiritual world who, when he describes these things, he knows them and sees them and experiences them in a timeless way. And that's how that was my realization on those occasions when I was allowed to be like a speck of dust on the wall and in Prabhupada's tent or in his room, wherever it might have been, where he was speaking his purports and translating his books. And those realizations led me to so many other realizations about Prabhupada that are so, I don't want to use the word inhuman because it may have a negative sense to it. So far beyond human, even though he's appearing in a human body or a human form to us. We are in our human bodies, in our limited state of consciousness with all the limitations that the body and mind and intelligence and false ego cover us, our original consciousness with. So I know there's a soul in every person's body, but I don't actually see it, but I know it's there by certain symptoms. But the idea that every soul is burning in the fire of material existence, I get that intellectually, and even in terms of our spiritual philosophy, I get that. But Prabhupada saw that, felt that. He felt that every soul is part of Krishna's family, and the souls who came here and are in material cycles of birth and death are burning up. He genuinely felt that. You could feel that pain, even if they were unconsciously not even aware of their predicament. He felt it. And at every moment, he's seeing that all around him. Imagine that desire that would create to want to save everyone. At every instant, he's feeling that way. That was part of my realization of Prabhupada's feelings and vision as he looked out at the world, that he was sent here to save and to teach and to reclaim. He actually saw and felt and experienced their pain to want to do whatever it takes to bring them back to Krishna, to push them up to Krishna. So when Prabhupada describes in all of his volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam the travels of the soul through the universe, he's not just writing academically, he's actually seeing the condition of the soul when it's left Krishna. And when he describes the spiritual world, he's seeing those eternal nityas, those eternal souls who are with Krishna. He's seeing exactly how they interact with Krishna, how they know exactly how to behave and what to do at every moment. There's no sense of time like we have it, that every single thing that they say and do and whatever it is, how they appear, it's intensely for Krishna's pleasure out of this level of love that we can only dream of. And he knows that, and he experiences that when he talks about that to us as well. So the idea that a person like Prabhupada actually descended like an avatar and walked the earth, and that we were alive at that moment when he was walking this planet, and we're so unqualified, and somehow he found us and allowed us to become, with all of our impurities, with all of our material desires, with all of our material characteristics, and all of us who were somehow on this planet when Prabhupada descended and walked the earth. And now we have, Prabhupada, we have to give what you gave to us. We have to give this to everyone else. We know who you are. Others can hear about it, but they weren't there to see it. We saw it. We saw someone from the spiritual world. Indescribably, we saw this. So we have to give this to everyone that we meet. We have to let them know that such a person was on this planet, and this is who he was. This is what he was like. This is what it's like when you come from that, from the spiritual world. He taught all of that to us. We've got to give Prabhupada to everyone. And on this day, Prabhupada, when we just can't imagine our fortune, there's no way to estimate how we could have been here when you were here and how you took us in. And the meaning of causeless mercy is, it's a shallow idea in our brains of how great your mercy really was to accept us as your servants. We have such a debt to Prabhupada. How to repay that debt to you, Prabhupada? Well, you showed us that up until your last breath, you were giving Krishna to everyone. And all we can do is pray to follow your example. On this day, Prabhupada, and on every day that follows, I pray that we always feel that way. And thank you, Chandrasekhara, for letting me.
Ravindra is here. If I could ask Ravindra to take to the center stage, and we'll hear from him. Thank you so much, Ramesvara. I appreciate it so much. All glories to the Vaishnava devotees. Let me switch the spotlight here.
Panchakalpatrubhyascha Kripasindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. I'm just going to read what's in the that I submitted for a Vyasa Puja homage this year. And I maybe give a little bit of a commentary on it. Of course, it starts with what I should say now too. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gaudavari Pacharani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha De Satarane Panchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Yebacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So as I write this, or as I wrote this when I was writing it, I am locked down, in quotation marks, as we are all locked down. I am locked down and practicing social distancing along with most of the human race, all enthralled to the depredations of a little bitty, teeny tiny virus, avidly transferring and replicating itself wherever, whenever, and wherever society socializes. A little difficult to be the International Society for Krishna Consciousness under those circumstances. News outlets relay much of the anguish and agony of sustained isolation. But it's a great time for loners like me, but not so much for our own international society, whose premier practice, Sankirtan, bears the prefix San, meaning together. And yet, even so, we are with each other, knitted closely together by that great and holy living network of indivisible bonds woven by Srila Prabhupada, and even now sustained by Srila Prabhupada, a marvelous network whose vast extent reaches from Bhuva to Spar and to Goloka. Prabhupada mentioned that in the spiritual world we shall have another ISKCON there. At the time he said it, I was on the GBC and I remarked, but no GBC. Little controversial, but that's what he said. We are eternal associates, spread out, but we'll be together in all different ways. So I also believe that Srila Prabhupada has prepared us for this eventuality now where we're in this state of apparent isolation. As part of his legacy, he has given us the basis for a true global unity that will flourish more and more, even as the false globalism based on lust for wealth and power falls bit by bit apart. That will also happen. You can see it starting to happen now. This false globalism has ravaged Mother Earth, and the current pandemic is only one of the signs that she can take no more. Remember the burden of the earth? Yeah? What is that burden? Demons. The true and valid global unity fostered by Srila Prabhupada will make food and energy production as local as possible and transform the family from a tenuous, frangible unit of consumption into a durable and sustainable unit of production. You want to see this vision? Prabhupada wrote it down in 1956, called The Conception of Gitanagari. Srila Prabhupada had also taught us that in Vedic culture, all living beings are praja, or citizens, and are to be protected by the king. This means, in contemporary terms, that all living beings, not merely humans, but also animals, and even trees and forests, have civil rights. This is a part of our ecology of the spirit. While the same modern technology is to be used when it is compatible with this spiritual ecology and is favorable for Krishna consciousness. Thus, Bhakti Vinod Thakur and Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur accepted the printing press and the publishing of journals, magazines, and books. And now, in that same spirit, we engaged computers and the global internet, just as we are doing this evening. In this way, we have the formula for the future. At the same time, we remain connected with our ISKCON founder Acharya, and through him with the 4 historic Vaishnava founder Acharyas, whose teachings and institutions achieve fulfillment in Lord Chaitanya and his ever-expanding Sankirtan movement. So let us continue to increase Srila Prabhupada's mercy in space and in time for the benefit of all living beings. So that's some pledge we should make to ourselves every time on Janmashtami. When we see the effort of so many devotees, we know that Prabhupada came here himself. But what was very interesting when I was researching the book about Prabhupada's position, when I was able to see how much the effort to go to the West was really took 150 years with even things like globalism, like the British Empire was global. But because it was global, Bhaktivinoda Thakur could think of himself as belonging to a bigger circle of people. He wrote journals. That was the way in the 19th century that intellectual ideas were spread. In London, in New York City, Calcutta, where people sat in coffee houses or tea houses, all publishing little journals and passing them around with each other. And this is how the latest ideas were spread. And he actually became part of that kind of a network. He published periodicals, Sajjanatoshini. And that was gradually changed to an English language periodical. And then it was continued by his son, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So that also, why were people writing the Sajjanatoshini? Because they were preparing to spread this movement outside of India. Bhaktivinoda Thakur had sent one of his works to Emerson. This was, this was a global network already. And so that idea was that Bhaktisiddhanta was also preparing, taking this movement, which with Bhaktivinoda Thakur found Jagannath Das Babaji, Gorkashore Das Babaji, these sort of recluses, these hermits who lived by themselves in Navadvip. He was a British government. He was looking for the authentic teachings of Lord Chaitanya. There were so many things. About the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, there was also a Hastings Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics published in England. And it just has a little entry under Chaitanya. And it says, he introduced a degenerate element into Vaishnavism. That was it. What's that degenerate element? Well, we get that from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bowels, owls, Gauranga, Nagaris, Kartabajas. He's labeled them all, pointed out what they are. He found out somehow or other, was able to find out where, in his judgment, these were the pure practitioners of Lord Chaitanya. And learning from them, he was an urban guy. These people were not urban people. He was in Calcutta. he made journals like everybody else. People were publishing journals and circulating his ideas. He was doing the same thing with Sajjana Toshini. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur then turned it into the English language harmonist. And everything that Prabhupada did, we know that when he came to the West, he had 3 volumes of books. But Bhaktisiddhanta was preparing a 3-volume Sri Krishna Chaitanya book to be taken to the West. And it was written by Nishikant Sanyal, who was a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta and who was a professor at Ravenshaw College in Orissa. So he was writing this book. I got a copy of it. Very expensive paper. Not a typo in it, because the whole combined effort of Bhaktisiddhanta's movement was, put into making a reputable book like this. Good paper, everything. The first volume was published. I think the second was written in, but I don't think it was ever published in Bhaktisiddhanta's time. But this was the one, when that volume was ready, they were going to go to London. That was the place naturally they would go. And they did. They sent missionaries to London. And you can read in the Harmonist, and some people went to Germany and said, this year we are having Vyasa Puja for Srila Prabhupada, meaning Bhaktisiddhanta, in Berlin. And anyway, there was these attempts made, and then there was a kind of a break for World War II. That's what happened. World War II happened. And Prabhupada wasn't the only one given this idea of writing in English, but he did it, and he did it all by himself. He had no institutional support, anything, but he gave up his position in business, decided not to do it, which made enemies of his family, at least a large number of them, his wife for sure. Because how Indians' marriages are arranged on the basis of your financial prospects, and he basically dumped his. And so while he was there, he was working on his books. This book, this ones he brought with him on the steamer. To come to America. This is an interesting thing. When I started coming to the temple, you couldn't. Bhagavatam was gradually coming out in little paperback chapters of the second canto. That's what was being published at the time that I read. And we had the Macmillan Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada, I think, called it my crippled child or something. Cut it way down. But I was able to read Bhagavatam in this one that Prabhupada had brought over. I want to read this original preface, not as it's been edited now, but just because this is Prabhupada writing, and although the English is not, perfect, it also you can hear his voice. So in his preface, he says, and listen to how prescient he is. He sees what's happening and what's going to happen. He says, we must know the present need of the human society. And what is that need? The human society is no longer bound by geographical limits of a particular country or community. The human society is broader than that in the Middle Age, and the world tendency is to become to one state is to belong to one state or one human society. The ideals of spiritual communism, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, are based more or less on oneness of the entire human society, nay, the entire energy, capital E, of the living being. The need is felt by great thinkers how to make it successful ideology. Srimad Bhagavatam will fill up the gap of human society, and it begins, therefore, with the aphorism of Vedanta philosophy as Janma Dasa Yataha, to adjust the ideal of the common cause. Now, see, there's a rhythm to this speech here that you kind of lose out when you fix up the English a little bit, but it's really nice. I'll read another paragraph. The human society at the present moment is not in the darkness of oblivion. It has made rapid progress in the field of material comforts of life, education, and economic development of the entire world. But it suffers a pinprick somewhere in the social body at large, and therefore there is large-scale quarrel even on less important issues. Therefore, there is the want of the clue as to how they can become one in peace, friendship, and prosperity by the common cause. Srimad Bhagavatam will fill up this gap by ontological aspect of human education. It is therefore a cultural presentation for the re-spiritualization of the entire human society. That's a wonderful, wonderful sentence there. And that's what we are about. It's a cultural presentation. That is to, when you things are dealing with culture, it deals with all aspects of life, not just high culture, but the anthropological sense of culture. It changes how you eat, how you walk, how you wear, everything. This is culture. The cultural presentation for re-spiritualization of the entire human society. Well, anyway, he goes on. I won't. But it's really lovely if you get a chance to sit and read this original sometime and just hear Srila Prabhupada's voice, and also understand what he went through to try to make this successful. He lamented himself that he didn't come earlier or come sooner, or that he was entangled in family life and he couldn't do anything. But Krishna is in charge of timing. And Prabhupada just happened to show up at the right time, the right place. And Krishna consciousness was so far away, apparently, from the mainstream of American society, that to become a devotee, you had to be a double dropout. You had to drop out from mainstream society into the counterculture, and then from the counterculture into Krishna consciousness. That was the steps most of us had to take at the time, you know. When I was coming to the temple, I was a graduate student in religious studies. And all the devotees told me to quit. They showed me how Prabhupada said that modern education is the slaughterhouse of the young. It's in his books, it's in Bhagavatam, you know. But I had finished all my coursework for a PhD. And so I wrote Prabhupada, what shall I do? They're telling me to quit. He says, no, you should get your PhD. And devotees said, oh, he's just telling you that because you're attached. He said, they were so certain you had to drop out. So anyway, this is Prabhupada's plan, and we have to carry it forward. I see all the things that we're going through now in the world, the difficulties. This also, we'll see the pinprick is turning out to be the pinprick of a very tiny virus that's coming around everybody, and thinking, you know, things are going to be okay and it's all going to go away right away. All of us will have to see the example that Prabhupada gave for self-sufficient communities, and we can see what's going to be global and what's going to be local. So the whole formula is there. Anyway, I'll stop now. But this is really the future. And what each of us has to do, our own little turf, is our body and mind, and especially our mind, to make ourselves more Krishna conscious. There's no upper limit of Krishna consciousness. So no matter where you are in the path of advancement, you can also become more advanced. And it's not just for us, it's for everyone else. If our Krishna consciousness increases, then we can also help give it to others. It will spread. It's viral. This is the real virus, Krishna consciousness. And it's catching. And people don't know how they get it, but suddenly they have it, and it kind of takes over their lives. So we should pledge ourselves to ourselves become more and more advanced. And remember, there's no upper limit. No matter how advanced you are, you can also get more advanced. We become more advanced, and then to share it with others. Become Krishna conscious yourself and give it to others. And this is how much we should show Prabhupada our thankfulness for the gift that he gave us and that Ramesvara so nicely described. Thank you. Hare Krishna.